Thank you for joining part two of our coalition building training series, Step into Power with Me. We are going to do a little housekeeping before we get started. We are going to go through this presentation in full and take questions at the end. And this is because we are recording the webinar right now. And so we want to make sure um, that those that could not join us today will be able to see this webinar. Currently, everyone is muted right now, um, with the exception of our speakers. We will unmute folks at the end of the event so you can ask your questions. If you happen to think of a question or want to make a comment during the presentation, it's okay to use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Also, I will send you the feedback survey in the chat box. Please take a moment to fill this survey out at the end of the presentation because your feedback means a lot to us and we take it very serious. So let's get started. My name is Tempest Tuggle. I am the operations manager here at Uncoke My Campus. I've been working with Uncoke My Campus for about 6 months now. I am going to pass it off to Samantha Parsons, our campaigns director here at Uncoke My Campus.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As Tempest said, my name is Samantha Parsons, and I am the campaigns director with Uncoke. I've been with Uncoke since 2016. So we can transition the slide. We are going to talk a little bit about our deliverables for this presentation. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Uncoke and our mission and our vision as an organization, and then kick it back to Tempest to get into the true content of this presentation. So today we are going to do a quick introduction to Uncoke My Campus. Tempest is going to give us a recap of the webinar that we had yesterday that this webinar is kind of playing off of. And if you missed that webinar, we did record it, and so it will be publicly available shortly. YouTube takes a minute to get things uploaded, but we're getting them as quickly as possible to you all. And then Tempest is going to walk us through some conversations about what it means to be a leader, how you declare your own leadership in a way that emphasizes the role that you play in an organization, but also creates space for new leaders to be born. Making propositions for those new leaders to come into action and build power with you, alongside of you, and different practices of accountability that you can use not only for yourself as a leader, which is really critical, but also the types of accountability structures we could apply to those that we're building power alongside. So for a quick introduction to Uncoke, slide please. So our vision is to ignite and preserve the power of the people by protecting higher education from actors whose expressed intent is to place corporate interest over the common good. What does that mean? So for us at Uncoke My Campus, this means we equip activists on and off campus, so students, faculty, community leaders, state-based advocacy staff, even our national partners, with resources, skills, and peer-to-peer support to take on the Coke network. Oftentimes people think that we only work on campuses because of our name, and that has been very much our bread and butter since 2014. But more and more people in the community have been reaching out to us lately, particularly in the past year, saying that they really encourage us and need us to expand our audience to work more off campus as well. And this actually makes a lot of sense for us to do. It's actually quite impossible to disconnect the influence Coke is buying on our campuses from the consequences our communities are feeling off of campus that are being caused by that influence on campus. And so while we still very much focus on building youth leadership and working on campaigns related to the college and university campus, we are very much expanding, and a lot of our vision is to bridge that gap between what happens on a university and what is happening in the community. In terms of our organizing approaches, we do seek to be anti-oppressive in our approach to achieving this vision. This means that we critically examine power imbalances through all the work that we do, including an analysis of the harms caused by capitalism and white supremacy in our messaging and our campaign work. And we seek to organize from a place that follows the leadership of those most marginalized and those most affected by the Koch network's agenda. On top of that, and very much in relation to that, our organizing model is a distributed model. This means we partner with organizations, so student groups, local community groups, state-based organizations, national organizations, to do this work. We exist to equip organizations, whether you're a student group or one of those state or nationally based organizations, with the analysis and with our theory of change in terms of taking on the Koch network, in hopes that the people that we partner with will run with the resources that we're able to provide and use them to do good in their community. Because the reality is that we are a national organization. We're a national organization of 3 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. And it's impossible for us to know what's going on the ground everywhere. And that's why it is our intention to organize from a place that it's just simply creating these resources and these networks to help those of you who are doing that really, really critical, impressive work on the ground, being able to incorporate resistance to the Koch network into that work that you're already doing. That's not to say that we don't support organizations who do create a new student group, for example. We do have several organizations that are like, unkoch, insert your campus name, and that's beautiful. We absolutely love that. But I do want to make it really clear that even if you don't want to replicate or start a whole new student organization or rebrand a campaign, that we can still support you in a lot of ways, provided you are committed to an anti-oppressive approach of organizing, and you're committed to taking on the largest political infrastructure in the country that's harming our communities. But we do it together, and it's exciting work. So thanks, Tempest.
Thank you, Sam. So we're going to do a little recap of our webinar yesterday, part 1. And we talked about traits of an organizer. So what makes an organizer? We discussed one's values, what shapes you, the self-interest, what motivates you to act beyond your immediate wants and needs to change the community. We also talked about how that informs us to build political power together. We discussed how we develop our story of self. Where do we come from? Not just coming into organizing and saying, hey, I just want to be a do-gooder, but how are you really centering your story? And also, how are you centering your values to build political power? So how are you centering yourself and owning your leadership, and using that to be clear of, this doesn't violate my values. And the types of relationships. So what are public and private relationships, how they intersect and are different from one another, and how our public relationships build onto building base in our community, as well as building base with our supporters. And then we talked about having one-to-one conversations. So what they are, how they build relationship, and we gave an example of what a one-to-one looks like. So if you haven't watched our first webinar series, we definitely recommend you watch the first webinar series so you can get a little bit more understanding about how that intersects with this part 2 webinar today. So I want to center Audre Lorde quote today that says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. The reason why I am centering this is because it is critical for us to think about as organizers how we develop the leadership of others, and how we sustain our movement and how we take care of ourselves, and so that we're not the only ones leading the work and all of this is on our back. And so let's get started. So we want to talk about declaring your leadership, and I want to share my declaration of leadership with you. So I am a powerful organizing coach. My purpose is to coach organizers and activists through leadership development, which I did not have access to in my early stages of activism. I stand for developing pipelines for new activists and organizers because I believe in developing leaders to take on new roles. I am creating a pipeline in which new activists and organizers can plug into for resources, training, and learning new skills, allowing for them to bring the community together on issues passionate to them. This will create relatable community organizers who will mobilize the community in ways unique to the community they are engaging. My commitment to developing this pipeline is creating leadership development curriculum that can be utilized in national grassroots organizing. So, owning your leadership. A lot of the times we feel overworked and stretched, and it's because we can't do it alone. So owning our leadership doesn't mean that it's solely ours. It also means that we are creating a vision so that we can bring others along with us to mobilize with a common goal in mind. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of steps of how you can actually declare your leadership. So you want to say who you are as a leader. Declaring your power statement that begins with I am. So who are you? I am strong, or I am leading this movement. So declaring your I am statement. Why am I here? So what is the contribution you have to make to yourself and others? So it's stating exactly why you are this powerful leader. What do I stand for? How are you centering your values based off of your story, and how did they shape you? What are you creating? So describe a vision that is very compelling and paints a picture of the community or the world you would like to see. And what is your intention? So what is your commitment and how will you make it so? So what are you manifesting in your leadership? So just a quick recap, who am I as a leader? Why am I here? What do I stand for? What am I creating? And what is my commitment? And how will I manifest this commitment? So this is my leadership stance and an example of how I declared my leadership. So I named who I was. I believe that I am a powerful organizing coach. I named why I'm here because my purpose is to coach organizers and activists through leadership development, which I did not have access to in my early stages of activism. I am telling you what I stand for. I stand for developing new pipelines for new activists and organizers because I believe in developing leaders to take on new roles. I'm also telling you what I am creating. I am creating a pipeline in which new activists and organizers can plug into for resources, training, and learning new organizing skills, allowing for them to bring the community together on issues passionate to them. This will create a relatable community organizers who will mobilize the community in ways unique to the community that they are engaging. And my commitment to doing this work is to develop this pipeline and creating leadership development curriculum that can be utilized in national grassroots organizing. So When you are clear and grounded in your leadership, you can make the ask and invite others with you to build power. So leadership development is really critical, right? Leadership development is really key to sustaining our movement, to self-care and preservation. So we want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and not owning all of the work. Sometimes in leadership, leaders think that it's okay because they're the leader that they have all this work bound on them. And that's not always true. Sometimes there are tasks that you as a leader can give up to begin to develop that leadership so that one day somebody can take over your place. We want to make sure that we're able to build coalitions and campaigns. We can't do this work alone, and a coalition of one person is actually not very helpful, and a campaign of 1 to 2 people is not very helpful. So we want to develop leaders so that we can build out our movement. We also want to sustain our movement. We want to make sure that people are in this movement with us, that we are keeping them in this fight with us. That is really important because sometimes if we are not developing leaders in a clear, articulate way, they actually will leave the movement because then they're like, well, what am I building? I don't even see the impact of my work. And we also want to make sure we're investing in rather than using people, because that is really critical. We don't want to use people and say, hey, I just need you to fill a role. We want to make sure that we are walking with people and letting them know how I'm going to take you to this role, how this is going to build this movement. We want to make sure we're growing our people power. Just like building coalitions and campaigns, that's where our people power lay. And so we cannot have just one person again on the team and think that is full of power. We want to make sure that we are honoring people's power. That is really key to letting people know that they too can be a leader, because in the end, anybody is a leader. Because if you are serious about social change, then you are serious about leadership development. Leadership development is just so key into organizing because it makes a difference into how we move our strategies, the tactics that we use in order to win. It also makes a difference in how we build out our rallies and actions. And so we want to make sure that we are developing leaders to sustain our movement. So some principles of leadership development that I want you to always remember that as you go and develop leaders. Everyone has the potential to lead. There is not one person who is more of a leader than another. Everybody is included in being able to lead. People deserve opportunities to take on more responsibility. It is not for us as organizers to determine what somebody else can do. And so we need to make sure people deserve to get those opportunities so that they can take on more responsibility as they see fit. And we also want to note that people stay involved for 3 main reasons, right? One, as I said before, they are part of a meaningful community. They feel involved, you have a relationship with them, and they can see their impact. That's important. Even if it's not a big win, also think about the impact that it has on your team. You built more momentum, you grew your team structure, you were able to have small victories along the way. So even if it's not connected to a big win, there's always some type of impact that this leadership development provided. And they're learning something valuable. So there's always an opportunity to turn each moment within developing leaders into a learning opportunity. And people develop as leaders through meaningful feedback, confidence building through coaching, and trust. So we want to make sure that we're giving people feedback that is clear and understood about the way they showed up in their leadership skills, even if it's great, even if it's constructive criticism. We also want to make sure that we're using coaching as an opportunity to build confidence. And this will allow for more trust to be able to be within our relationships with these people. So when developing leaders, these are more things that you want to think about as you are organizing and developing your plan. So you really want to plan ahead and know who your team is. Are there leaders who are on the edge of burnout? Are there new leaders who just came in and need a leadership opportunity? And how are we passing on that information so that leaders who maybe graduating college campuses, or leaders who are just taking a vacation or a sabbatical, how are we passing down that information? So we always want to make sure that we are creating that pipeline ahead of time to always think about the new leaders that are always coming in our movement. We want to make sure that we are deepening our relationships. So one-to-ones are very important because they build relational relationships. And we want to maintain contact by just saying, hey, how are you today? Just check in and let's see where people are. We want to make sure we're building leadership. So how are you using your campaign actions or roles within the organization to give people more responsibility? So what are these roles that can be filled? Provide feedback, right? So provide feedback and coaching that makes people feel like they are being invested in and feel part of a movement. A lot of times I've watched leaders be developed and they received no feedback, and so they didn't even know how they were doing. And sometimes that also left for leaders to felt like they were not being invested in. So it was easy for them to just walk away from the movement. And we don't want people feeling like that, because you're here because someone didn't make you feel like that. So we also want to make sure we're honoring new ideas. This allows for new strategies that may be unseen and opportunity for learning. Sometimes we do the same old tactics, but new ideas cultivate new strategies and new tactics. And that's okay. And it's maybe an opportunity for either or parties to learn why this may be feasible and why it may not be feasible for the movement you are building. So we have a leadership ladder. Our leadership ladder is a tool that we use to be able to identify people's leadership. So I'm going to kind of start from the left to the right so that you can follow along. So at the bottom of our leadership ladder is how we recruit people. So we recruit people by inviting them to meetings and having one-to-ones with them. And then as they become more involved, we ask them questions to step into their power, which we call propositions. And so what does that look like particularly? So your supporters are people who support your issue. They may sign your petition, follow you on social media, they may register to vote, and you ask these people, or these people may just show up to meetings and rallies, and or they might volunteer. And so once you begin to dig a deeper relationship, because now those people are mobilizing, you want to kind of proposition them and get them to organize, right? So ask them to lead trainings or plan the meetings or plan the actions. So you want to make sure these people are climbing up the ladder. And the way we do that is we create different litmus tests to see if they will be able to do it. So can you recruit 5 new people? Can you bring 5 people to this rally? Or will you be able to make phone calls to turn people out? So what are things people can do that you can see their leadership and how to get them to move up and own their leadership as well? You can get them to mobilize for events, right? So making sure that they have volunteer roles as well, that each role should have a name. And each role should have a name because once a role has a name, the person feels a responsibility to be accountable to that role. And also identify leadership opportunities and make propositions. So this may sound redundant, but it's not, because as organizers, we always have to keep identifying leadership opportunities and making propositions for people to step into those roles. And we also have to make sure we're continuously providing meaningful feedback and understanding what kind of support they need to identify this leadership role that they're stepping into. And we want to make sure we're deepening our relationships. We do not want transactional relationships with people. The reason why we do not want transactional relationships with people is because it doesn't allow for people to feel invested in. Our work doesn't grow, and they're not going to move up in the leadership ladder if you are not supporting them and walking through with them. So let's talk a little bit about propositioning others to step into power with us. So we want to make sure that we are always asking people to step into power and step into leadership. So I keep saying propositions, propositions. So what are they? Propositions are a way for you to invite people you're in a relationship with to lean into their leadership and build power with you. Propositions should be specific, inviting, and create space for a person to say no or renegotiate. So here are maybe a few questions that you really need to think about when you are propositioning. So who is the person you are inviting into a leadership role? So you need to name them, right? So earlier I talked about manifesting your vision with other people. And so like, how are you going to manifest their leadership? So name this person, right? Do you have a relationship with this person? If no, you need to go and do a relational one-to-one with them. You need to get to know who this person is. And the reason why I say that is because can this person call you by name? When they see you, can they say, hey, Tempest, it's me? If they cannot, then you actually might need to do a relationship with them, build a relationship first with them so that they know who you are and what your intentions are. And so the other reason why you need to have a relationship with them is because you need to know what is this person's purpose, what's in their self-interest, what motivates them to act. Why do you want to invite this person into leadership with you? So what are you thinking about when you say, I want Sam to be in this leadership role? Always make sure that you are being clear and honest and transparent about why you are asking this person to step into leadership with you. So how will you make your invitation into leadership? I'm going to give you some guiding questions that you will actually prepare. So you will write this down and you'll take these little steps. But also remember that this is a person you should have a relationship with, at least one meeting with, before you ask them to fulfill a role. So you need to say why I value you. So when you say why I value you or why you matter, what is it about this person that brings fire? Why are they so important to this organization or team that you are building? What is your reflection of their leadership? How have you watched them, right, grow into their power? Or what do you see that is holding them back that you can see that they need to be the most effective in? What is a role that they can play? And be specific about the role. Yesterday in our one-to-one conversations, Sam talked about research, that she was interested in research, but she was also willing to do more public speaking. So what is the role I would give her is research, right? Because that is a skill that she could play. And the responsibilities of that role. So there were toolkits that were involved, and so giving them the things that they need to be able to complete that role. But before you can ask that question, you have to be clear about those responsibilities, because if you don't, they will be confused. So during the meeting, you will discuss these few things. How am I prepared to walk with you? So what kind of training will you provide them? What type of coaching will you do with them? Challenging them. So how are you going to agitate them on maybe the way that they're showing up? How are you going to challenge them to work a little harder? So sometimes those are hard conversations we got to think about as organizers that we must have to develop somebody's leadership. And accountability. So what is your expectation of this person, and what should this person's expectation be of you? You also are going to need to address what might get in the way, because that is key, right? Sometimes we don't foresee things getting in the way just because we say, yes, we'll do it, but actually sitting down with that person and having them evaluate what's in their life right now that could possibly get in the way, and make a plan to address what may get in the way, and make a plan to follow up and create a plan of a mutual accountability. So once you've propositioned the person, you want to make sure that you create time to follow up with them, and you also have a clear understanding of the mutual accountability. So you want to evaluate your proposition. Please don't be afraid. I have a proposition worksheet that I will send out at the end so that you can see how to make this so that you're evaluating correctly. So you want to think about the seriousness. Was this conversation scheduled and face-to-face? So was this person able to actually see you? So sometimes we know that we can't see people face to face, but did you at least do a video chat where this person was able to see you and you all were able to share that in-person communication? Clarity. Was the invitation clearly stated? Did this person understand why you were making the invitation? Were you being direct and straightforward? So did you go, I need you to do this because I see this in your leadership, or did you round about the question and make it sound really confusing? Purpose. Were you clear about why this person is important to me? Did you say why I value you as a person, or why you matter to me? Were you clear in the way that the invitation aligns with their interests? So as an organizer, it is one of our duties to always understand what a person's self-interest is when we are bringing them into power leadership with us. Agreement. Was there clarity around their commitment and your commitment and next steps? Did you give them an opportunity to explore doubts, concerns, and an opportunity to reject the invitation? So Was there clarity around the things that you would do and the things that they said? Did you all make time to follow up, or what are the next steps did you have to take? If this person said yes, this might be easy. But if this person said, I don't know, let me think about it. Well, did you give them an opportunity to figure out like what maybe be the doubt or the concern, or did you give them an opportunity to reject it? Accountability. Did you both have an agreed upon plan of accountability? And what is the commitment you will fulfill? So how are you going to plan out your commitment as an organizer to them? And what steps do you need to do to take in order to make sure you are being accountable to them? Your relationship. Was your relationship strengthened as a result of this? Or was it damaged as a result of this? So you need to figure out, how did this person leave this conversation feeling? And is there anything that you need to go back and maybe repair? Did it land too harsh? Did it land unclearly? Did you know that this was in this person's self-interest? So being very clear about, how did this relationship land and what do I need to do? So you want to make sure that you're using these 6 steps to reflect on your proposition to someone else. So good tips to making good propositions. Proposition them into roles that make sense for them and not roles you need to fill. This is really important because we don't want people to just do roles that is not going to be beneficial to their leadership development. We want to make sure people are doing roles, even if that means you have to step back as a leader for them to do the work. Make leadership opportunities accessible and break them down thoroughly so that new members and volunteers can take on leadership roles. So when you're having meetings or rallies, are you having an opportunity to sign leaders up for new volunteer opportunities? Are you making sure that they are clear enough that they feel comfortable and empowered enough to be able to sign up for that before they leave the meeting for the day? So we want to make sure that we are keeping these leadership opportunities accessible to everyone. We also want to make sure that we're giving leaders titles like phone banking chair, sign-in captain, welcome committee chair, so that they can feel more accountable and responsible. I remember my first phone banking chair assignment. I was so excited. I was really excited about making sure that everything was prepped and ready to go for the other phone bankers. So I was more accountable and definitely more responsible because I was given a volunteer role like that. Show appreciation. A lot of the time we do this work, and over the years, I have heard that this is thankless work. It does not have to be. You can show your appreciation by checking in with this person and saying, yo, you did a really bomb job yesterday. Like, that is dope. And like, give them a compliment. Thank you for taking on this role at the last minute because no one else would do it. Also, it doesn't have to be the one-to-one, right? We can also do public recognition because that's also motivating and encouraging, right? To say, hey, I want to take time out in this meeting to just give a shout out, you know, to Sam for doing all this really hard work. This really couldn't have been done without them, and I'm proud of the leadership that you've really taken on and stepped into. Train them into their roles. You want them to know that you are helping them remain accountable and provide skills that they may not have. It is critical that we are training people into their roles so that they are showing up and clear about the duties assigned to them. when we are organizers and we are developing leaders, it is definitely key to make sure that people understand their roles and that they do not just a good job, but they actually have a level of accountability. So my expectation of you is to make sure everybody is signed in today. Or my expectation of you today is to make sure everybody has a folder. And so that way you can coach them through how come maybe they weren't showing up like that, right? And we also want to make sure that we are debriefing the actions, meetings, and events where they had a role. This is an opportunity to provide meaningful feedback and coaching support, right? So this allows for you to check in with them, even if you say, hey, right after an action, you say, hey, I really liked how you showed up. Tell me, how are you feeling about what you did today? Or can we take time to sit and talk about it? So this is a great opportunity to provide that meaningful feedback about what they did, how they could do better, or how they're such a rock star. And this is an opportunity to get into the coaching to help build morale. So your accountability commitment. So as an organizer, you are sometimes a coach. And this requires you to think about how you're going to walk with this person through their leadership journey. This is key because as a coach and as you're developing leaders, the leaders are looking at you. They are looking to you to see how they will develop future leaders, right? And so the ways that you can provide this accountability is to recognize their leadership potential. What do they have the capability of? Because you've provided a different set of litmus tests for them to get different tasks done. And so what is their potential really? Are they just breezing through stuff? Can the work be a little bit harder? Can it be challenging? Is this bringing out the best of them? Is this making them retreat and step away? So recognize their leadership potential. Have a regular committed time to check in with them. Like I said, I know you can't always talk to people because a lot of the times we're busy, but just making time for one 30-minute conversation just to check in and see how things going and how are they feeling about their leadership positions, or just to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. I'm then thinking about ways you can grow. And be clear of their self-interest. It's very critical for you to understand a person's self-interest and why they are being motivated to act, so that you can always provide and identify trainings and opportunities that actually meet their self-interest. You don't want to send people to a media training and that is not in their self-interest, because that's not getting them to the leadership that they see themselves in. So how are you helping people see their self-interest and guiding them through that? And provide agitation, or this is just a clear way to say, how are you helping one gain clarity on things that really might get in the way? How are you getting them to shake the dust off so that they can be the leader in the way that they need to be? And we also want to make sure that we are always providing meaningful feedback that is super clear to their leadership development. So these are the ways that you can make sure that you are committed to being accountable to developing your leaders, because that is critical. As an organizer, we need to be thinking about these leaders all the time. They should be at the forefront of our minds when we make plans. They should be at the forefront. How are we putting them in roles? And how are we building a community with them that makes them feel like they are being invested in? And how are we helping them manifest their leadership? So I am about to pass it off to Sam. Thank you so much for listening. Sam is going to take us through some next steps.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
We can.
Sorry about that. I was muted again. Thanks so much, Tempest. This was absolutely amazing. Before we move on to next steps, could I ask you to go back to a few slides just so I can plug just a few additional points?
Oh, yeah.
Could you go back to the leadership ladder real quick? Because I think that that was a really critical piece of this, and I want to talk a little bit about it from my perspective of working with students regularly. Awesome, thank you. So yeah, Tempest was fantastic in walking us through the value of a leadership ladder. And I just wanted to re-emphasize a few points. So in my capacity as campaigns director, it is my job to mentor and work with students who are working to implement a leadership ladder on campus and build new leaders. And I just want to really highlight, for those of you who are students on this webinar, that this is absolutely critical. This entire presentation and the idea of building leaders is really critical, particularly in student organizing, right? I actually think that this is much harder when it comes to student organizing than it is when it comes to sometimes community organizing, because when you're organizing with communities, oftentimes those people are settled in that space and you can invest and build with those folks long term. On campuses, we naturally have significant turnover in terms of leaders because y'all graduate, your peers graduate. And so I just want to really highlight that, like, not only is this really critical, I also really want to take this moment to honor college organizers, because y'all have to do this leadership development in ways that oftentimes I think community organizers, they don't necessarily, they confront their own challenges, of course, but continuously recruiting new people is absolutely critical on campus, because you're naturally going to have people come in and out of the movement much more fluidly because of graduation. I also want to emphasize that in building leaders, trust is key. So you really can't move anyone up the leadership ladder if you, as a leader yourself, are not confident in taking a risk maybe and trusting someone new to take on a role that maybe has been in your wheelhouse and you know you can do it really, really well. But if you don't kind of let it go and let someone else lean into that role, they're never going to be able to become the leader that you are. And we're actually going to talk a lot about that tomorrow in the last part of our webinar. But this common theme that I see in all organizing, and I have experienced this and practiced this lack of trust myself as an organizer, it really feeds into these concepts of perfectionism, of power hoarding, and of gatekeeping. And like I said, we're going to go into detail on those cultures of organizing tomorrow, but sometimes you just have to take that risk. I know it can be scary, especially when we're building campaigns around really trying to make change and prevent harm that's being caused and that's really hurting people. But it's a really beautiful opportunity to say that, you know, the sustainability of our organization and the development of leaders who can go off, graduate, and make change in other spaces might be your goal. Like, you might not win your campaign before you graduate, but if you can invest and build 5 new leaders to continue that campaign, you won. But a lot of that takes like some serious reflection and commitment to trusting your gut and trusting the people that you're building with, and to resist this like urge that I think we all have to lean into perfectionism. And so I really wanted to hone in on that. And again, I'll be talking a lot more about it tomorrow as well. And on that note, the last thing I want to say is that, oh no, I have two more things. I'm sorry. In terms of the litmus test can be really critical to give people a goal to shoot for, but make sure it's not used to be punitive. In organizing, I know that we can get oftentimes really focused on numbers and on quantity. And if you want people to recruit 5 folks, that's an amazing goal to set. But if they only recruit 2, they still did it. And instead, it might, like that litmus test provides you a really awesome opportunity to provide feedback and talk about challenges, and even give that person a pep talk and in recognition that like these challenges that we face as organizers do pop up, and very rarely do we always meet our quantity or quantitative goals. But just the fact that they took the risk and put themselves out there and recruited 2 people is still a sign that they are a leader, and you should continue to invest in that person. Last but not least, in terms of being able to utilize the leadership ladder effectively, it requires current leaders to have their act together. And I speak from personal experience as a student organizer who at times did not have her act together. Leaders need to be prepared ahead of time with what I would like to call, I don't know if this is commonly used, but I'm going to start using it, evergreen tasks and events. So in the advocacy world, there's this concept of evergreen materials that you can create that are probably going to be sustainable long term. The content in those materials aren't going to change week to week or month to month. So they can be toolkits and resources that you can make once and not have to edit regularly. If you apply that concept to student organizing, odds are every campus student group who's trying to build a movement or build an organization are going to have very similar evergreen tasks that have to happen semester to semester. This could include planning a welcome week event, tabling on campus every week to just get more exposure for your organization. I always encourage student groups that I work with to plan at least 2 fun outings for their students, for their members, that have nothing to do with campaign work, but it just builds rapport and camaraderie amongst the team. You might be able to identify a few weeks every semester where you're going to have like a webinar, and you're going to have this webinar every single semester, or you're going to have an event every single semester that looks very similar. Be really cognizant and put effort into thinking through what those evergreen tasks look like semester to semester. Write them down. Think about all the different tasks or logistics that go into pulling off one of those evergreen events or meetings, and have all of that information in the back of your mind, because those are things that if you have your act together in that way, you can immediately start plugging someone new into. A challenge that I've experienced and I've witnessed is when students and student groups just plan week by week. While they still get things done, it becomes much more difficult to automatically think through tasks that you can immediately ask someone new to take on. And so just the more that you're prepared and the more you're planning ahead in the work that you're doing, the easier it will be to bring someone new into leadership with you. And then if you could go to the accountability slide, Tempest, I think it was one of the last ones. Yeah. I just want to emphasize here, please use Uncoke as a resource here. If you are seeing that you have 10, that's a big number for student organizing sometimes. Even if you have 3 new people that keep showing up regularly and you want them to get more informed on the Coke Network, ask us to facilitate a Coke Network 101 training with you, or webinar, or ask us for resources. We have toolkits that you can give these folks. Don't make more work for yourselves than is needed. Uncoke My Campus at the national level can be an accountability with you. so that you can be meeting the needs of your new recruits and your new leaders effectively without putting all that pressure on yourselves. We can help you as leaders be accountable to your future leaders. So please don't be afraid to reach out and ask for that support. Okay, so in terms of next steps, I, just before we close, want to thank everyone again for joining us. As we mentioned at the top of the call, this is the second webinar in a series of 3, and so I definitely encourage you to go back and look at the first one and be present for tomorrow's if you're available. This webinar series, in summary, is all about building power and building powerful relationships in order to build a movement. And so much of that is rooted in knowing like why you're committed to this work, taking the time to find out why someone else is committed or interested to this work, and then trusting that person and their passion and giving them a role to play. Because like I said, I know as a student organizer myself, it sucked to graduate and not see that the campaign that I've been running, we hadn't won it yet. But at the same time, I was also able to graduate knowing that there were incredible leaders coming up to continue that campaign, and I played a role in recruiting those people and exciting those people and giving those people a role to play. And that is something you should be just as proud of as winning a campaign. And so I really hope that these webinars are helping, shift your perspective on that if you haven't already had that perspective. And so in terms of next steps, like I said, review the webinar from yesterday, develop your leadership stance. So take a moment and really reflect on who you are as a leader, and become confident even calling yourself a leader. Oftentimes I don't think we're told well or told enough that we are really valuable and that we're really amazing leaders and that we have skills that we can pass on to other people. And so take a minute to give yourself a pep talk in that way, and developing your leadership stance like Tempest taught us can help give you that pep talk. And if you're ever feeling frustrated, reread your leadership stance. And then I really encourage folks to reflect on those evergreen tasks that I mentioned a moment ago. Sit down and think about content, events, actions, recruitment strategies that you all oftentimes utilize semester to semester, and start mapping that out on the course of a semester, and have that planned out on maybe an organizationally shared calendar. And then think about the tasks that are required to do those things. And those can be you can literally have a checklist for yourself that you could start plugging your new members into so that you can make that formal proposition. And again, reach out to Uncoke if there are tasks that are taking a lot of your time, or if you're struggling to balance recruitment and the proper accountability needed to really build these leaders. That is why Uncoke exists. We have monthly strategy calls that people on our campuses can join. I really wish more people brought their new recruits to those calls, or asked their new recruits to join those calls instead of, not that I don't want to see all of your faces all the time, but I would love to see more new faces on those calls, because that can also provide us as staff the opportunity to do some of that leadership development with you. And then I know a lot of us, we're hosting these trainings during the coronavirus quarantine and social distancing that's happening right now. But that doesn't mean that you can't still reflect on 5 people that you might want to make a proposition to. Reach out to them, have a conversation with them about their leadership via phone or video chat, and make a commitment to them about how you can support them in growing as a leader, even digitally. And I will say that on Uncoke, we value digital organizing very heavily, and we're working on coming out with some more resources, just like these webinars and toolkits that really emphasize the power of digital organizing, because I know many of your campuses have decided to close for the remainder of the semester. And so there are really awesome ways that you can still do this work via phone, via video chat. And so if you're kind of feeling bummed that all of your meetings have been canceled, or your campaigns, you're not sure where your campaigns are going because of school closures, please don't despair. There are definitely incredible tactics and strategies to still continue this leadership development even from afar. And that's something that we are also happy to help you build, those types of digital organizing plans through Uncoke. And that's a wrap for me. Thank you so much, Tempest.
Thank you so much, Sam. So I am going to take this time to open up questions if you have them. I will unmute everybody so that maybe you can ask questions if you want to. Or you can put them in the chat box below.
No question, but David, Florida Student Power, just want to say thank you for this. It was a really good content, and I appreciate that it's teachable. And I might take you all up on like doing a presentation for our folks. And I think talking folks through the leadership declaration, I think would be really great and powerful for folks.
That's